Over the course of my final senior semester at Temple University, I've taken an environmental ethics class. This class has covered various approaches to tackling the issues of our environment. One of the major issues that I like to spend time discussing today is the issue of the fast fashion industry, highlighting ways in which it has negatively affected the environment. Ultimately, I want to ask the question, is fast fashion worth it? Before I start to speak about fast fashion itself, we first have to discuss consumerism. Now, a quick stroll to Merriam-Webster's dictionary would have us define consumerism as the theory that an increasing consumption of goods is economically desirable, and also as the promotion of the consumer's interest. In layman's terms, this means that buying things is good. Some might ask the question, good for who? Well, in this case, good for the economy and the consumer, where consumer is the one who is purchasing the items. So it seems that this is a good thing, right? I mean, if I go to my local Primark or pull up the Shein app on my phone to purchase clothing, it's mutually beneficial, right? No harm, no foul? Well, not quite. Unfortunately, if it were that simple, I wouldn't be making this video. In addition to consumerism, marketing, fear of missing out, trends, and planned obsolescence lead to overconsumption, where planned obsolescence refers to products that have short lifetimes solely to encourage consumers to buy more products. Consumers buying more products is the hallmark of overconsumption, which is consumption or purchasing in excess, aka greed. This greed is partially responsible for driving our environment into decline. Hopefully, this picture is starting to come together a little bit. Consumerism on its own may not seem so bad, but under certain systems like capitalism, for example, it can get there. For those who may not be aware, capitalism, aka the free market economy, is an economic system that is characterized by the privatized ownership of production and goods, meaning that people, not the government, can own and run businesses. Generally, supply and demand decides what gets made. Through advertising, companies can manufacture demand by convincing consumers to buy their product. When consumers purchase certain products, it rewards the company with money, of course. Under a capitalist society, there's an incentive or motive that drives this. That incentive is profit. In this chase for profit, businesses are not solely attempting to meet the financial needs, but continuously expand their company. In industries such as the fast fashion industry, there are multiple companies that are fighting for the attention of the consumer to purchase their product. Many fast fashion brands are vying for their chance to be the biggest fish in the pond. The faster that a brand can produce their product, the faster that they can make money. These attitudes feed into overproduction. Making clothing quickly becomes the goal, and taking shortcuts leads to a decrease within the quality of materials being used in fast fashion, leading to clothes that end up in landfills over short periods of time, which is the effect of that planned obsolescence that I mentioned earlier. It is under capitalism that the quality of goods are worse than what they should be. It is also under capitalism that consumerism is promoted. And lastly, the effects of capitalism persist due to the desire to make profit. Now that I've provided necessary background, I want to speak about fast fashion in the general sense. To start, I wanted to touch on seasons. As we know, there are 4 seasons within the year: autumn or fall, winter, summer, and the best season, spring. This has nothing to do with the video, I just really like the spring, but I digress. Generally, fashion follows these seasons, and it makes a lot of sense, right? Clothing stores wouldn't be focused on selling swimwear in the winter and snow boots in the summer. There's a time and place for everything. Under fast fashion, however, things become a little bit more extreme. There are up to 52 micro seasons depending on the brand. That's a new season for each week within a calendar year. With all of these clothes being for one week of the year, it begs the question, how do fast fashion companies make, source, and create their clothing in such a rapid way? Well, an environmental health article discusses that this is due to outsourcing. I quote, the textile and garment industries, for example, shift the environmental and occupational burdens associated with mass productions and disposal from high-income countries to the under-resourced, e.g. low-income, low-wage workers, women, communities in low and middle income countries, or LMICs. Businesses will source their labor to countries where it is both cheaper to make the clothing and pay workers. This article maintains a viewpoint that fast fashion is an issue of global environmental injustice and seeks to explain the ways it can, has, and will harm people in LMICs. The 2018 article explains that LMICs produce 90% of the world's clothing and that there are health impacts associated with the production process. This environmental injustice, synonymous with the term environmental racism, is exploiting people within LMICs on a grand scale. The raw materials or textiles used in this process, like polyester, are oil derivatives, whereas fabric like cotton may require water and pesticides to produce. In addition to this, the fabric dyeing process leads to wastewater with pollutants and contaminants. The material of cheaply manufactured clothing itself may also be a problem for consumers. An article looking at the toxicity of synthetic fibers discusses popular fibers used for clothes It explains there are two types of fibers, including natural fibers derived from vegetables, animals, or mineral fibers, like cotton, jute, linen, wool, and silk, and man made fibers, synthetic fibers, which are made synthetically in laboratories by using chemicals. Some polyester, for example, is created from paraxylene. This is derived from oil, as I mentioned before, and has been shown to have a toxic effect on humans. Other synthetic materials, such as spandex, can trigger skin allergies after long term wear due to chemicals it comes into contact with during the manufacturing process. There are other side effects that will vary depending on the chemical used in the manufacturing process across various fibers. The same study links rayon to nausea due to carbon disulfide and nylon to skin irritation due to hexamethylene. None of this information is being presented to scare you, but it definitely helps beg the question, is it worth it? Much of the fast fashion clothing ends up as waste. The environmental health article explains that the average American throws 80 pounds of clothing away annually. It further explains that this occupies 5% of all landfill space. The clothing that isn't occupying these landfill spaces end up in those LMICs mentioned earlier. 500,000 tons of clothing are exported out of the US every year. This doesn't begin to cover other countries such as our neighbors in Canada or even the continent of Europe itself. The article explains secondhand clothing not sold in the United States market is compressed into 1,000-pound bales and exported overseas to be graded, sorted, categorized, and rebaled by low wage workers in LMICs and sold in secondhand markets. Clothing not sold in markets becomes solid waste, clogging rivers, greenways, and parks, and creating the potential for additional environmental health hazards in LMICs lacking robust municipal waste systems. Now, with all this considered, it's imperative that we look at the positives of fast fashion. It's clear that fast fashion itself provides a wide variety of clothing to consumers at low prices. This is very important when considering low-income communities. I'd say that everyone deserves clothes, including those who cannot afford to break the bank on new purchases. It's also very convenient. Nowadays, consumers don't need to travel to stores, everything is accessible online. Additionally, there are people who have jobs in this industry. They have made a livelihood from being a part of the design team or working in retail stores themselves. Consumers can stay up to date with the latest trends by purchasing what's currently in season. Fashion is a great outlet for individuals to express themselves as well. Lastly, clothes take time to make. Fast fashion clears this process by having clothing ready to wear in stores. So, back to the question, is fast fashion worth it? Since there are so many factors to consider here, I cannot take a universalist stance here and paint one side as completely wrong and say it isn't worth it. It is true that everyone should have access to clothing when they are in need. However, it also shouldn't come at the expense of others. Poor working conditions and environmental safety issues underline a need for change. I think that this issue should be addressed on three different levels: the business, consumer, and legislative levels specifically. For business, there should be a company-wide business model committed to sustainability, consumer awareness, and fair treatment and wages to those who are involved in the manufacturing process. H&M, for example, now has a conscious action sustainability initiative that reflects exactly this. Additionally, developing and sourcing more sustainable fiber alternatives will be important for our environment. It's imperative that companies actually follow through with this. On the consumer end, I would posit that there needs to be more awareness spread on fast fashion. In this day and age, it should also be easily and readily accessible forms of media. The consumer should demand more sustainable practices be implemented from companies. In addition to this, the consumer should demand a more transparent manufacturing process with less harmful chemicals used in this process as well. Buying secondhand or higher quality clothing would also contribute to less wasteful practices. Policymakers should consider enacting legislation that seeks to actively prevent and correct environmental harms and injustices created by industries such as the fast fashion industry. Policymakers also possess special obligations to the members of LMICs. It's possible through trade agreements and taxes between countries that the import of these textiles go to ensuring the safety and environmental health of these LMICs. So, back to the original question, is fast fashion worth it? That's a question that's best left up to you, honestly, the viewer of this video. What I will say is that over the course of the semester, environmental ethics has taught me the importance of humans in relation to their environment and the impact that we have on this world, for the better or for worse. Hopefully, with all the information presented and potential approaches to solving challenges that are present in the fast fashion industry today, you can come to a decision. Thank you.